Previously on my adventures speedrunning Diablo 2.
Woo! Roll down the window.
I did it! 6 hours and 59 minutes and 30.
Oh, right under 7. Let's go.
Some 7 hours.
That's a starting point.
That is a starting point. That is. Oh my god, this is so painful.
Welcome to part 3 of my series on speedrunning Diablo 2 Resurrected. If you want to check out any of the other videos, they'll be in the description down below. First, I went over tips, strategies, and all that in a rough draft speedrunning the game. Then I showed a glimpse of how awful I was at my first attempt running the game. Now I want to redeem myself and show you how I got better. As you can probably tell, there were a lot of optimizations that could be done, and quite frankly, several hours that could be lopped off easily. You see, if you recall, I spent hours retrieving my body and items in run 1, because I thought if you left the game, that your body and items despawn. My cousin conveniently let me know when he was around next that you could leave and your body would respawn in town with your items, so I could cut off a lot of time in my second run. It took a few days to decompress, as my body likely aged a lot faster after 7 hours of one run. One can say I'm speedrunning death, but that's morbid, so we'll frame it as speedrunning life. I'm gonna be honest, the next run I pretty much improved at everything. I literally golded on every split, and saved nearly 3 hours of time. But how did I do that? Well, first, I started menuing better. I had plenty of time to get better at that considering the 40 minutes I spent in the shop last run, and countless minutes longer in my own inventory. This is just sort of a muscle memory thing, and you'll slowly get better at it, even looking at items in the shop. In the records, they pretty much gloss over everything, and somehow still pick out the 10% faster cast rate wands. It's mystical. Next, I was a little more familiar with the quest line. I'll be honest, I was pretty rusty in my first run back, and I definitely didn't retain everything from Mr. Llama SC's tutorial series, even though it's very thorough. So it helped just running through it all once. Then the big stuff comes. I was better at microing and more familiar with my combo and abilities, so that sped up all the boss battles and mini bosses like Diablo's 3 minions. I was starting to aggro things on my own accord and clear out areas to make big clusters more manageable. And like I said, if I died, I'd just leave and grab my body at town. Finally, I was level 20 when I arrived to the area summit. This time I killed the ancients in fewer attempts, and though my throne room left room to be desired, I died around 30 times. Because of the amount of gold I lost earlier in the run due to carrying it all on me, I also had to return to the Countess again to regain some gold and eventually finish out the run, killing Bale. This netted me my next PB with a time of 4:06:15, a 2 hour, 52 minute, and 58 second time save for my previous time. As you can see, with my splits, most of the time save was in Acts 4 and 5, and the explanations before should support that. Next, I had to work on my map reading. I wasted a lot of time exploring lots of the maps to find what I needed, but if I studied a bit, I could learn the patterns better and guess where I should go. So I set out to do just that. I booted up my battle.net sorceress to randomly generate new maps, and bought a lot of mana potions. When I went into each act, I followed along with the pattern from this awesome website by Teo. From then on, in every run I'd pull up this page from that site, and I'd have it on my second monitor. Eventually I knew all the patterns, but for a while this was what I used to help when I was second guessing myself. During my next research phase, I got curious about how it was even possible to get runs down to about an hour long. The Countess runs, even when fully optimized, might take around an hour 20 to an hour and 30 minutes. This is when I found out about jail strats. In my rough draft video, I talked about how jail strats are like rolling a d40. The odds to get a good champion fallen tile next to your jail level 1 waypoint is so low that this strat requires grinding to find a good spawn. Well, I didn't read the part about how rare it was, and I assumed it was somewhat common and got going. I then got to the barracks, which is one level before the jail level 1, and I found a champion fallen spawn inside. This isn't the most optimal spawn, but if you get the outer cloister waypoint, it actually works out kinda decently. It would have been so good if I realized I could scale the XP with the player setting commands at that point. But due to my inefficiencies at menuing and other Act 1 things, and a few deaths, I spent longer than desired in Act 1. But now I had teleport in Acts 2 through 5, so I golded in all those splits, clutched out a 40-minute faster run. Most of my time saves were in Act 2 and 5. Act 2 is simple. I can now TP everywhere and just finish the quests instantly. The only downfall was subpar map reading. In Act 5, I had a good Ancients clear and brought a Merc to the throne room, killing waves 1, 2, and 4, and cheesing the rest out of the room. Brought down my deaths significantly, and all this led to huge time save, giving me a great run. But at this point, I was reaching my wit's end with the game. Some things just didn't add up. It felt like my runs were so bad compared to the top runners, and watching them, I just thought their game looked easier than mine. I was curious how rare jail strats really were, so I reached out. I put up a post in Discord and a post in the speedrunning forums, and got some nice responses on mercenaries, jail strat odds, when to use the player setting. I also learned about the beetle route and bail minion skips. So I started watching videos on bail minion skips first, since I hate a few of the waves. There are really cool in-depth guides like the ones by Macro Bio Boy, but for some reason, what he was saying wasn't translating into my game well, and I think that's just because I paid too much attention to one of the things he said, and it just wasn't working for me. So I ended up finding a video by Mr. Llama SC. It's a little less in depth. This is because it was near to when this was discovered. And he basically says to leave the room as soon as Bale stops laughing. Not as precise, but for some reason it was working better for me. I wasn't consistent, but if I was lucky I'd skip a wave or two. I then went into my next run and was going to test out the beetle strat. Then I respec'd too early, didn't have a point in Nova, so I did 0 damage to anything and had to kill the run. So then in my next run, which I PB'd, it looked like this. We get a great start with Act 1. It turns out, when you grind for jail strats and restart a lot, you get good with the first act. I also watch a lot of runs on the leaderboard, just to see what they did in Act 1. I noted when they left the Den of Evil, when they got to the Countess, when they left there. I was now able to gauge different parts of Act 1 without only looking at my final time. Now I could reset if I didn't have Taleth at a certain time, or if I didn't get out of the Den of Evil by like 7-ish minutes in. I then got to Act 2 and did the PX Beetle strat, and it was great. I didn't do a great job finding the Hall of the Dead, Claw Viper Temple, and Maggot Lair. Both TP it didn't matter. But I made a grave mistake and put Taleth in a magic chess piece, so they were useless together. The rest of the run was killer though. I got First Way Arcane Sanctuary for the first time, brought a Merc to Mephisto to clear him faster and die less, managed my Merc better at Diablo's minions, and healed him at the Ariat Summit so you could tank more to first try the Ancients, and I ended up skipping 2 Bale minion waves. What went wrong was horrible map reading in the jungle. Lord DeSace ended up spawning Lightning Resistant, which is a no-no with a Lightning Sork build. So I tried to kill him for a little while before I realized I should just relog, and then I actually did. Overall, this was a great run. Those couple things kept me above 3 hours, and it ended up with a 3:08 real time. I even lost less gold to dying, so I didn't have to return anywhere to restock on gold or items later in the run. Next, I got my final PB, which really doesn't have anything big to talk about. It was just improving things I mentioned before. I now knew that I could shift-click my potions to heal the mercenary without dragging them to his portrait, which was definitely helping. I didn't get any Bale skips, but I cheesed the hard ones out as I now had a lot more control over my character, and had done enough limit testing to know what would kill me and what wouldn't. I did have a slight scare at the Ariat Summit where I almost died. Other than that, the run was fine. I ended with a run timing at 2 hours and 32 minutes. And that's where I called it. I had another run after that where I saved 10 minutes going into the 4th act and killed Mephisto a lot quicker with this way of shift clicking, healing my Merc. But I was a little underleveled, didn't have a lot of fire resist. So I died to Diablo's minions in Act 4, being a little too greedy, and would have lost all the time trying to get more potions. I tried starting more runs, but just lost my motivation to run more and more as I kept dying in stupid ways in Act 1, so I called it. With regards to my final thoughts, I figured I'd go over some data collection I did on my runs, and talk about what it means and how it could help runs in the future. But mostly beginners, since a lot of these are just mistakes the top runners wouldn't make at that point. For some fun, we'll first showcase the progression of deaths per act per run. I feel pretty good about this one. I mean, on one hand, I died 150 times the first run, but I only died 8 times in my last run. I think this is useful for determining which acts are the hardest for a new runner, as they'll die a lot in the harder acts. It also shows that if you're not an idiot, you'll most likely only die in Act 5, or to just bosses in general. We also see that on average, it took 2.2 paths of the Arcane Sanctuary, which is fun. Statistically makes sense, I guess. Another fun one is interesting is the amount of gold lost to deaths and how many deaths contributed to gold lost. As we can see, this number also decreases as we died less, but still lose a significant amount of gold in runs with less deaths. It was only in the last run where we lost almost nothing. One way, as I mentioned before, to stop this is to drop your gold on the floor in town, safer than those greedy banks. Lastly, we'll talk about time. In these tables, it's interesting to see how my time differed from the world record and in what acts were the least optimized on my end compared to that. Obviously, when you run different routes, the distribution of time in each act is skewed, but it's still interesting. Clearly, there's still a lot faster methods to Act 1 if we consider that the world record uses jail strats, but it's still 22 minutes faster than my Countess runs. Also, my map reading on Act 3 really shines, as even when I got a fast time in Act 3, I was 11 minutes behind the world record time. That's just pure knowledge, as Ty Lopez would say. Differentiates me from the world record runner. But that's pretty much it. I may come back to this game at some point to put up a co-op run or a hell run or a hardcore run, because those categories sound fun or interesting, but I'm happy to now lay this to rest. Important note to future runners though, you must have the in-game timer running on the screen to have a non-RTA time show up on the leaderboards. But I'm now comfortable at spot 8 on the leaderboards. Given my time, I'm sure it'll be lower soon enough. Thanks for watching.